What's the difference between the cooperative bank and the other major banks? Is it that we have 24-hour telephone banking? Is it that we have a network of high street branches? Is it that we have the use of over 6,000 link cash machines? Or is it that we promise never to invest our customers' money in countries with oppressive regimes?
Goes through this. We didn't know which instrument they were using in the electric shop. And one day, when my friend were standing near the wall, and they came and tried to shot him in his testicles. So they, by the flag.
The electroshock baton has been described as the universal tool of the torturer.
They came like this and they tried to shot him in his testicles. What? And so he stole from underneath the blindfold this stick, which gives us all this pain.
At the very moment the men were being tortured in the Lebanon, Dispatches was negotiating to buy electroshock weapons from the Royal Ordnance Division of British Aerospace, Britain's leading arms manufacturer. They were being shown to us by middleman Jerry Hall.
What's the maximum you can do?
We can take it up to 120.
Royal Ordnance salesman Philip Morris offered us millions of pounds worth of electroshock batons and shields, while we were posing as businessmen linked to the Lebanese government. We discussed the deal at a meeting with Martin Trengove, the head of Royal Ordnance's Middle East sales.
We are in a sample situation that absolutely tests the situation. Before we start getting involved in multi-million-dollar things,
The companies we exposed on the torture trail subsequently denied what millions of viewers had seen with their own eyes. Frank Stott of ICL Technical Plastics offered to sell us millions of pounds of electroshock weapons. After Dispatches was shown, his company said it had never sold them to anyone. The boss of International Procurement Services, Jerry Hall, helped to put together the British Aerospace deal. But after Dispatches, Jerry Hall said he had never sold electroshock kit in his life. British Aerospace offered us over $3 million worth of weapons. After Dispatches, it denounced what it called our subterfuge journalism, and also said that it had never sold electroshock weapons. The fiercest reaction came, however, from Michael Heseltine's DTI. The then president of the Board of Trade accused us of scaremongering, of contrived allegations, and of making a story that otherwise did not exist. The government rejected Amnesty International's demand for an inquiry into what it called the grave and serious charges, and Heseltine's ministers leapt to the defence of the companies we exposed.
May I ask the Minister to look again at this whole issue with particular reference to electric shock batons?
Well, my lords, I really do think the noble Lord Doves, I must say to him this, that he should not take every single television program at its face value. There are certain people who are prepared to make programs and who are prepared to entrap people into saying things and then to put those on as programs in which they purport to show that people are behaving in an untoward way. I have explained that the result of that particular program involved 3 particular firms, and those firms have acquitted themselves reasonably.
If that behavior is reasonable behavior, then we certainly have different understanding of what reasonable behavior is. Reasonable behavior cannot be a behavior that leads to undermining the system of international protection of human rights. Reasonable behavior cannot be a behavior where, using the loophole that exists in the legislation, a company will make benefits as a result of trading in weapons that are misused by security forces to torture people. This is money which is earned on the blood of victims.
The public outcry that followed the torture trail was a mixture of shock and disbelief that the government could possibly allow this to happen. But our sources told us that it was still very much business as usual in the British torture trade.
You've got companies now setting themselves up as what's known as one-stop shops. They may not make all the products, they may not necessarily have them all in stock, but they will arrange to have them shipped from all four corners of the planet to wherever they need to go. But the important thing is to follow the money. If the money comes back to Great Britain, then Britain needs to take some of that responsibility.
We set up a dispatches front company in Switzerland, in Bâle on the Rhine, where France, Germany and Switzerland meet. Our company was called Eric Lopez Associates, and we contacted 8 British internal security companies, saying we wanted to buy a package of riot control equipment that included 300 electroshock batons. Initially, only 2 companies refused. None of the British companies that quoted for electroshock equipment bothered to check out the credentials of Eric Lopez Associates. Had they done so, they would of course have found out that Eric Lopez does not exist. They might also have found out that their quotations were being received on a public fax machine here at a train station in Switzerland, and they were being read not by Eric Lopez but by dispatchers. Some of the companies warned us that it was illegal to sell electroshock batons in Britain, but their faxes reassured us that the weapons would never have to touch British soil. The company's enthusiasm to deal with us was clear in their sales patter on the telephone.
It's obviously illegal for us to sell from the UK. So, in theory, what we would do is we would either send everything from New York to Switzerland or the destination that you require. It's entirely up to you. No, we'll quote for the stick. We can quote for the stick, no problem. Right, so it gives them a huge electrical shock. Low current, high voltage.
Right, non-lethal though.
Oh yes, I mean that's the whole object. Otherwise, you just shoot the guy. So I mean, this is basically to make him behave himself.
These are really good quality electronics with a proper rocker switch and a handle. I mean, what's known as a hot coil. It isn't a cheap piece of shit. You can actually use them to hit people and they don't fall apart like some of this stuff. I mean, a decent quality.
Companies were not put off when we said that our client was the Zairian government, which has an established reputation for torture. President Mobutu's police favour electroshock batons for torture because they don't leave marks and their victims don't have scars to show Amnesty International if they survive. Roberto, a refugee in Zaire, was tortured.
À ce moment-là, ils m'ont encore pistonné ce bâton électrique, mais c'était au niveau du cou et au niveau des sexes. Et ça m'a fait terriblement mal que jusqu'à aujourd'hui, au moment où je parle, j'ai difficile à rester assez longtemps, la tête bougée, parce que j'ai encore très très mal à ce niveau-là, comme au niveau du cou.
The first company we approached to buy electroshock batons for Zaire was SDMS Security Products Limited. It operates from tiny premises on a single floor immediately above a tanning shop in the Fulham Road in London. SDMS is a member of the Defence Manufacturers Association, and one of its directors has an OBE. A source in the Ministry of Defence alerted us to the company's brochure, which advertises electroshock weapons. We invited SDMS's chairman, David Knights, to meet us in the Intercontinental Hotel in London. We said we were here on a brief visit from Switzerland. We secretly filmed our meeting with Knights. He was confident he could provide us with electroshock weapons.
We'll provide you with a sample, you know, we'll be completely confident.
Okay.
Well, what would happen is we would prefer to ship them direct to your client, if that's possible. Particularly if it's coming from South Africa and the client is Zaire, it will save time, obviously. We can get it done through England, but we don't want to do it because, as I said, technically it is, well, not technically, the goods are illegal here.
300 shock batons for £22,000 were included in the riot gear package Knights offered to sell us. He also sent us details of previous electroshock sales made by SDMS Security Products and its associates in South Africa. They claim to have sold them around the world to countries including Libya, Nigeria, Sierra Leone and Angola in Africa, and Mexico, Peru, Burma and Indonesia, all of which are known to be torturing states. After Mr. Knights turned down a request for a formal interview, we decided to confront him.
Good morning. Is Mr. Knights here? Thanks. Just through here. Ah, Mr. Knights, good morning. Martin Gregory from Channel 4 Dispatches. I'd like to ask you why you sell electroshock batons.
I'm sorry, get out.
Mr. Knights appeared reluctant to answer our questions.
Don't assault our cameraman. I don't think that'll do you very much good at all.
Do you mind getting out of here?
Well, I do actually, because I want to ask you some questions.
Sorry.
This was to prove difficult as my camera team and I soon found ourselves on opposite sides of a firmly closed door. I rejoined the crew 5 minutes later. Knights now claims he doesn't deal in electroshock batons, just like the businessman we exposed a year ago. Paddington Green Police seized Jerry Hall's electroshock riot shield last year. He had lied to us when he said he had permission from the Home Office. None of the companies we exposed then, including British Aerospace, had the necessary permission to hold or to sell electroshock weapons. The police spoke to us as potential witnesses to the offences we had filmed, but no prosecutions followed. A serious rumpus ensued, however, as the British Aerospace salesman led the torture trail to a secret at the heart of the biggest defence deal in British history, the £20 billion Al Yamama deal between Britain and Saudi Arabia. Philip Morris claimed it included 8,000 electroshock batons.
I mean, I've said too much about telling you that we've sold them to Saudi, I mean, and any numbers, but it's... British Aerospace have a, you know, the Al Yamama program, which is billions from...
Yeah, just the other bit, yes.
It just gets swallowed up in things like that.
It gets swallowed up in that?
Yeah.
Michael Heseltine signed the Al Yamama deal with the Saudi government when he was Secretary of State for Defence. It is Britain's biggest ever arms deal, and its precise terms are a state secret. British Aerospace is the main contractor on behalf of the British government. The government and the company firmly denied Morris's claims that electroshock weapons were sold to the Saudis. Morris was suspended by British Aerospace in the row that followed the Dispatch's revelations, pending, British Aerospace said, disciplinary procedures against him and Trengove. British Aerospace has never revealed what action was taken.
Dear Mr. Butler, after watching Channel 4's Dispatches earlier this week, I felt I had to register my complete disgust how Britain could endorse such goings-on without turning a hair.
Anne Gibson was one of many Channel 4 viewers who were shocked by Dispatch's revelations about the claims that torture weapons were swallowed up in the Al Yamama deal.
I've never written to an MP before, so I was quite amazed how the letters started snowballing, quite a few letters.
The reply from her own MP, Peter Butler, was remarkably frank. Dispatches, he wrote, had told lies, and the film had been manufactured to serve the career interests of the programme makers. Butler had been briefed by the DTI.
When I got the reply, I wasn't satisfied at all. All they did was deny that anything untoward had happened, which seemed very strange as we could see it happening on the video film.
Geoffrey Bindman is one of Britain's leading libel and human rights lawyers. He successfully defended Clive Ponting, the civil servant who had been accused of leaking secrets about the Falklands War. I asked Bindman to study Heseltine's letters.
I would be hard put to it to find any comparable example of cynical manipulation and dishonesty on the part of government as this one.
Michael Heseltine had won praise from Sir Richard Scott in his Arms to Iraq inquiry because of his strong objections to signing public interest immunity certificates that were placed before him in the Matrix Churchill case. Yet in this instance, Heseltine had signed ill-thought-out letters about the torture trail that had originally been drafted by a civil servant, who gave no indication as to whether he had actually watched the programme. On Beinman's advice, I started libel proceedings against the government.
It was an attempt to rubbish the programme, and presumably, from the government's point of view, they were trying to use this as a means of avoiding investigating the allegations made in the programme.
Rather than investigating our allegations, the authorities began to investigate us, the programme makers. Shortly after I started legal action against the government, the Ministry of Defence took over the police investigation into the offences we had filmed. The Ministry of Defence Police decided that it was me, as well as the businessmen dispatches had exposed, who might have committed crimes. They questioned me as a suspect rather than as a witness. I was interviewed by the Ministry of Defence Police under caution in the presence of my solicitor. They told me that because of my role as the reporter on the torture trail, I was being interviewed as a suspect. They told me that I could face the criminal charges of handling electroshock batons and also of inciting British aerospace officials to break the Firearms Act. If charged and convicted, I could face a prison sentence of up to 5 years. We asked Michael Portillo, the Defence Secretary, to be interviewed on this programme to justify the investigation and also the use of taxpayers' money on it. He replied that he couldn't take part because it is an ongoing police investigation. Surprisingly, the government did not even submit a defence to my libel action before conceding defeat in the High Court for the letters signed by Michael Heseltine and his ministers.
The Department of Trade and Industry has agreed to pay £55,000 in libel damages and costs to a journalist after it accused him of making up evidence about the sale of torture instruments by British firms. The DTI accepted that the allegations about the producer of the Channel 4 documentary Dispatches were untrue.
The government conceded defeat as soon as MPs returned to their constituencies for the summer. The Labour Party called for Michael Heseltine to personally pay the total cost of the court case, £86,500, but the Prime Minister insisted that the taxpayer would foot the bill. In its statement in the High Court, the government apologised unreservedly for accusing me of making up our exposé of the British torture trade. It said the programme had been properly researched. But the government insisted that no export regulations had been broken. A week after its libel defeat, however, the government made an even more significant admission. Ian Taylor, one of the DTI ministers who signed some of the libelous letters, admitted that electronic batons had been given a licence in 1993 for shipment via the UK. This answer confirmed that as well as libelling me, Michael Heseltine's DTI had been lying when it said that the trade in electroshock batons did not exist. The trade does exist, and the government knows it exists.
In the months since the programme, they've given the impression that their hands are clean, that the export of electroshock batons was something very far away from them, and now suddenly they produce that answer.
Anne Clwyd was the MP who extracted Ian Taylor's admission. She has moved 4 early day motions signed by hundreds of MPs and asked over 70 questions on issues raised by the torture trail.
This is an interesting one, asking the President of the Board of Trade to list the companies to which export licences were granted for the export of electronic batons in the last 5 years.
And what answer did he give you?
The first part of this question could only be answered at disproportionate cost.
And that basically means that they're not going to answer it, does it?
That's right, they don't want to answer it. I think there's an enormous cover-up going on, and that the government is deliberately dragging its feet. That's a conclusion I've come to after a year of asking questions.
I think it was a naked political cover-up. I don't think that the government wanted anybody to get too close into the whole Al Your Mama programme. I mean, it is of such importance to the government that anybody who criticises it, or indeed criticises Saudi senior officials' dealings, are going to be stamped on fairly hard. I think the programme, in my opinion, was 100%, and that subsequent events have only lent credibility to that view.
Subsequent events appear to have left Britain's arms dealers unchastened. This is another British businessman prepared to export electroshock weapons to Zaire, despite Britain's official policy of upholding human rights.
Because this sort of thing is really difficult to get an export license for.
Why?
Yeah. Oh.
What is it?
Human rights. You know, because the way they look at it is that there is a Zairean policeman wandering around the streets, giving all his fellow countrymen an English electric shock. Yeah. And that is really bad news.
But we were about to find out how he can, quite legally, sell electroshock batons like this to Zaire, with no interference from the British government. The torture trail has led us to the largest city in the world. We've come to Mexico City to visit a factory which makes electroshock weapons, described by human rights groups as the universal tools of the torturer. Dispatch's journalist Christopher Martin and myself are posing as British businessmen. Our introduction to the Mexican manufacturer came from a British company based in Wiltshire. They also sent us leaflets describing the batons we were about to see.
Ranging from the 18-inch to 36-inch.
Yeah. And 36 inches?
36 inches.
Well, that's 3 foot long.
Yeah, and one of them has a spiral that runs down the outside.
But what voltage is this?
They say they're all 50,000 volts, which they claim to be safe, humane.
The McCoyser company in Mexico City operates from behind a wrought iron grille and 2 bomb-proof doors. Inside, they're keen to show us their range of electroshock weapons. It's legal to make and sell them here. Each of these batons emits a charge of 40,000 volts. The shield has the same voltage. The Americans classify this as a torture shield. McCoyser's boss, Alfredo Aguilla, is confident that he can export the batons on behalf of his British client to anywhere we choose.
From Mexico government, no problem. Maybe in your country, you need a license for import, but export license from Mexico, no. So we don't have any trouble.
Yeah, even if it's a government with maybe a problem government, there's no problem?
Bad human rights record, no problem?
No.
That's
no
good.
Problem.
No
problem. Good. Well, that's good because the Zaireans are not well known for their human rights, are they?
I think you don't have any trouble in Africa.
No.
But one of the problems we have is the Zairean government. It's not so nice.
I know.
You understand?
Yes, I understand you.
We were invited to test the universal tool of the torturer ourselves.
Yeah. But I heard, you know, that in some places they use them for interrogation.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And then it's dangerous.
Sometimes. Especially what you put in the gun.
Really? And then what happens?
Little damage.
So it's like torture. It's like torture then.
Aguilla is a former major in the Mexican army. He was proud to show us around his electroshock factory. Britain classifies these batons and shields as weapons. Their possession or sale in the UK carries a jail sentence of up to 5 years, the same penalty as possession of an AK-47 machine gun. Aguilla was happy for us to film and to chat to the workers. They appeared well aware of the dangers of the products they were making.
¿Es dangeroso?
¿Doloroso?
Sí. Sí.
Mucho.
Mucho. Wow.
We showed one of the Mexican shock batons to Roberto. He was appalled that a British company could be involved. The batons were almost identical to the ones used to torture him in Zaire.
Ma réaction pour découvrir ces types d'armes, je ne sais pas, je pourrais vraiment les qualifier comme quelque chose de très affreux, de très immoral. Parce que ceux qui le font ne les testent pas sur leur corps et ils ne savent pas ce que ça fait. Ils le font pour faire souffrir les autres, tout simplement pour gagner de l'argent. C'est très malheureux.
The British company that had set up in Mexico was Compass Safety International, formerly Compass Maritime. It's better known for selling marine life-saving equipment like navigational aids and life jackets. But in London, Compass Safety International Managing Director Bill Buttimer made it clear that he could use Mexico to avoid British export controls.
Right, now do you foresee well, we're not going to need an export licence?
No, you're not, because they're coming straight out of Mexico.
So the problem's...
Yeah.
And is Zaire going to present a problem at all with this?
No.
Right, okay.
New Mexico,
no, there's no problem. Because you said West Africa, and I thought it would be Nigeria.
That might have presented a problem with the moment.
No, it could have done, but it wasn't even going to present a problem with Nigeria.
Because you could have done it from Mexico to...
Yeah, straight in.
So basically you can do anything from there. You can circumvent every...
Sure, if you can get the kit there.
Compass Safety International offered to sell us 300 electroshock batons at $25,000 and said the riot gear we had requested would come from a Scottish company, ICL Technical Plastics in Glasgow. Buttimer told us that our contact there would be none other than Frank Stott, an old friend of the torture trail.
Okay, give it a good blast.
Stott is currently under investigation by the Strathclyde police after showing illegal electroshock kit on dispatches last year. He had boasted of British government support.
That's something that's important, isn't it? Yeah.
The government are very keen that we get involved in the export business of this.
Like Bill Buttimer of Compass Safety, Stott didn't really want to know who he was selling his weapons to.
With this sort of kit, to be honest, I tend not to ask too many questions about what they're doing with it and where it's going.
I suppose it's just business, basically, isn't it?
As far as I'm concerned, they're all grown men, they know what they're doing. Although I sometimes wonder about that.
We had first met Stott and some of his grown men at the COPEX exhibition. The Covert Operational and Procurement exhibition is reputedly Britain's most tightly guarded internal security fair. It's held at Sandown Park Racecourse every year. In 1994, we filmed secretly inside for the first time. There were no torture weapons on display because they're illegal, but we exposed it as a good place for starting deals in weapons that can be used for torture. We encountered Stott, who briefed us on his electroshock weapons, and later offered to sell us nearly £2 million worth. In the bar, we continued our negotiations with the Royal Ordnance Division of British Aerospace and Jerry Hall for an electroshock deal worth $3.5 million. COPEX 95 was greeted by demonstrations and protests for the first time in its history. After the torture trail's exposure of COPEX 1994, widespread protests in Germany led to the cancellation of COPEX Bonn last summer. At Sandown Park, demonstrators laid siege to COPEX 95.
Join the blockade, just come through and we'll start sitting down across this entrance here.
I really just do not understand how that they can claim that it isn't an arms fair and that they are not involved in promoting the arms trade, because they are.
Right. Some of the demonstrators had been sued by COPEX after writing to Sandown Park, pleading with it to refuse to host the exhibition. One of those sued by Copex is 78-year-old Quaker Alan Staley.
Go in because I want to have a word with Commander Julian Winkley, who's the boss of this outfit, because he has issued a writ against me, and I would like to discuss it with him. I'd like to find out why he has done it, and I think this is an issue that we could discuss as man to man.
That's an issue for you and him. All I know is that you're not allowed past these gates at the moment.
Copex boss, Commander Julian Winkley, turns out to be a former drama teacher. At Copex 95, he became photographer Julian Winkley. He busied himself taking snaps of demonstrators being turfed out of Sandown Park. He claims Copex is open to the public, but this is not true. Even MP Anne Clwyd couldn't get in.
All I want was permission to come round the fair.
Yeah, and he hasn't granted that.
He hasn't granted that. So I, as a Member of Parliament, cannot come in.
Well, that's what he said. And I can only reiterate what he said to me.
Thank you very much.
Dispatches was also refused entry to Copex 95. But this man was inside. He changes his appearance frequently to gain entrance to similar exhibitions all over the world.
You have to become part of the business. So I'll shave, I'll have a suit. You have to look the part. I talk to people at their stalls. I sit in bars and listen to people, basically just gathering intelligence on the trade and what's being made.
Can you understand why Copex keep the press, demonstrators and members of Parliament out?
Absolutely. If they've got people coming from torturing states, they certainly don't want to be seen and have their photographs put across the world's press.
Who did you see in there?
There was quite a large delegation from Indonesia, at least 7 or 8 people, and they were being shown round by a British gentleman, and I could tell that because they actually had Indonesia written on their badges.
The Indonesians at Copex were in fact from the crack military unit, Kopassus. Its soldiers were involved in this notorious massacre. These pictures alerted the world to the Indonesian army's atrocities in East Timor. Kopassus was present in the cemetery on that day. The Indonesian embassy confirmed that Kopassus representatives were flown in from Jakarta specifically to attend Copex 95.
Kopassus has a lot of blood on its hands. The Indonesian army units and Kopassus have been involved in not just extrajudicial executions, but also torture, disappearances, arbitrary detention, incommunicado detention.
We had spotted an Iranian delegation at Copex 94. As they inspected state-of-the-art covert surveillance equipment, the Iranians were rubbing shoulders with the British Army. The government distanced itself from Copex when challenged in Parliament. Britain has a complete ban on military sales to Iran.
What on earth are we doing, allowing delegations from Iran to attend arms fairs here? He might also have found equipment on sale or available through that exhibition capable of use in torture. Does the Minister think that this is the best use of British taxpayers' money to be sponsoring events of this kind?
This is a private exhibition, as I understand it. There's no taxpayers' money involved.
The Defence Minister was being less than accurate. This written answer from Trade Minister Philip Oppenheim shows that the government had spent over £81,000 of taxpayers' money on travel grants to help British companies attend 6 Copex exhibitions abroad. And Dispatches has discovered further compelling evidence that DTI advice on electroshock sales was being distributed while Michael Heseltine and his ministers were assuring everyone that the trade did not exist. This report, 3/4 of which was funded by the DTI, contains advice to British companies on where to sell electroshock weapons in the Gulf, where torture is widespread. The section on the oil-rich microstate of Qatar, where floggings are commonplace and beheading occurs, contains the following advice.
Qatar. Key market points. The special forces are interested in procuring electronic batons.
Compass Safety's Bill Buttimer also claimed that the government had helped him get around Parliament's restrictions on the sale of internal security equipment to Indonesia before he joined the company.
I mean, we had something called a fragmentation grenade, which was basically anti-personnel, and it shoots a crowd of ball bearings out of a discharger on a vehicle. So it's great for anti-ambush and that sort of thing. Sure. And we couldn't get an export license for that, but we said, hell, you know, you've just sold them tanks with high explosives. Now they said that's for defence, but this is for internal security.
So they never got the things in the end?
Shortly after that, somebody in the Ministry of Defence said, well, why don't you call them anti-ambush grenades? Change the name. So we said, well, that's a good idea. So we put another one, anti-ambush grenades, and we got it just like that.
When dispatchers confronted Compass about its electroshock dealings, the company immediately withdrew its offer and said it does not sell electroshock weapons. Compass chairman Don May said he abominates the deliberate infliction of pain on a helpless person, and he announced that Mr. Buttimer had resigned. It was the former managing director of Compass Safety who had shown us the most profitable route on the torture trail, offshore production. The profits come back to Britain, and no one raises awkward questions about human rights.
It's not just good enough to prohibit the manufacturing of this equipment in the UK or the sale or possession of this equipment in the UK. Legislation should also prohibit companies from engaging in offshore sale of this equipment. Why is it prohibited in the UK in terms of use? It's because this equipment can be misused to cause extreme pain and suffering, and even to cause death.
We started off on the torture trail nearly 2 years ago to investigate a trade that the British government claimed does not exist. But we found a string of British companies prepared to sell these weapons and some evidence of active support from the British government. By using countries like Mexico to make electroshock batons, the companies can do their deals, and the British government can claim that no export regulations have been broken. They haven't. It's all perfectly legal and very profitable. Britain will retain its status as a key provider of weapons to torturing states around the world, unless and until the British government puts a stop to this morally indefensible state of affairs.